Commerce Minister Wang Wentao meets U.S. Trade Representative. Henry Kissinger celebrates 100th birthday today. Health experts warn Hong Kong's COVID infection trend is plateauing. Hello and welcome to TVB News. Just a day after meeting U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo in Washington, Commerce Minister Wang Wentao met with U.S. Trade Representative Katherine Tai in Detroit on Friday. Both sides raised concerns on key issues in U.S.-China economic and trade relations, as well as Taiwan-related issues. But the two countries agreed to maintain exchanges and communication. Tracy Furness reports.
The meeting between Commerce Minister Wang Wentao and U.S. Trade Representative Katherine Tai took place on the sidelines of the 2023 Apex Trade Summit in Detroit. Reports said they held frank and pragmatic discussions covering bilateral trade as well as international concerns. The Chinese side raised concerns on a number of issues, including Washington's trade policy towards Beijing, the Taiwan issue, the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, and Section 301 tariffs. U.S. Trade Representative Katherine Tai raised complaints about China's state-led economic policies. Tai said the discussions also covered the importance of the U.S.-China trade relationship in the global economy and the need for both sides to continue engaging with one another. Tai emphasized the importance of maintaining open lines of communication between the two countries and building on the engagement between President Biden and President Xi in Bali in November 2022.
The benefit of sitting down and having a conversation with an interlocutor from Beijing is so that we can understand each other better and understand how we are experiencing the impacts that we have on each other's economies. And that is the point of the communication. In Bali, both of our presidents instructed the teams to communicate, and that's what we've been doing.
Wang Wentao had just met U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo in Washington. Some reports suggest China is concerned about the U.S.-led Indo-Pacific Economic Framework that excludes China. Tai told a gathering of regional trade ministers that the United States is engaged in a fundamental reorientation of trade policy while supporting sustainable and inclusive trade throughout the Asia-Pacific region. Tracy Furness, TVB News.
Former U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger celebrates his 100th birthday today. Beijing's ambassador to the U.S. Xie Feng met with Kissinger in Kent, Connecticut on Friday ahead of his birthday. Xie expressed his best wishes to Kissinger from the Chinese side. The pair had an in-depth exchange of views on China-U.S. relations and international issues of common interest. Kissinger has remained a leading voice on U.S. foreign policy since serving Republican presidents Richard Nixon and Gerald Ford in the 1970s. Then he had a hand in many of the epoch-changing global events. The German-born Jewish refugees' efforts played a part in the diplomatic opening of China, the expanded ties between Israel and its Arab neighbors, and the Paris Peace Accord with North Vietnam. Beijing's Special Envoy for Eurasian Affairs Li Hui and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov met in Moscow as Beijing heads a diplomatic effort for a peace deal in Ukraine. Meanwhile, Russian missiles hit a clinic in eastern Ukraine on Friday, killing at least 2 people and wounding 23. Elsewhere, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said the war in Ukraine must not end in a frozen conflict.
Russia's foreign ministry said in a statement that Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and Chinese Special Envoy Li Hui discussed prospects for resolving the conflict in Ukraine at a meeting in Moscow on Friday. At the meeting, Lavrov expressed gratitude for China's balanced position and willingness to play a positive role. Beijing has put forward a 12-point plan for peace in Ukraine that involves declaring a ceasefire. Li has been on a tour of European capitals and last week visited Kyiv. After those talks, China said it wanted to form the greatest common denominator for resolving the Ukrainian crisis. That's in addition to making its own efforts to stop the fighting and establishing a ceasefire and restoring peace as soon as possible. Meanwhile, video footage showed devastated buildings after a Russian missile hit a psychological clinic and a veterinary clinic in the Ukrainian city of Dnipro. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky subsequently tweeted, "Another missile attack, another crime against humanity." Kiev said its air defenses had shot down 10 missiles and more than 20 drones launched by Russia in overnight attacks on Dnipro, the capital Kyiv and eastern regions. Russia's defense ministry said it had carried out an overnight strike on Ukrainian ammunition depots. Elsewhere, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said the war in Ukraine must not end in a frozen conflict as he met with Baltic leaders in the Estonian capital Tallinn on Friday. Scholz and the leaders of Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania gathered to show a unified front of support for Kyiv in its war against Russia ahead of a NATO summit that will take place in the Lithuanian capital Vilnius in July. Speaking at a joint news conference, the Baltic leaders reiterated their backing for NATO membership for Ukraine and pushed for members to raise their defence spending. At its Vilnius summit, NATO leaders are set to approve secret military plans that will detail how the alliance would respond to a Russian attack. Such plans have not been drafted since the end of the Cold War. Danoral, TVB News.
Back locally, the Urban Renewal Authority says it is likely to have to rely on loans to continue developing projects in the coming few years. The managing director of URA, Y.G. Singh, said on a radio program that the renewal projects in To Kwa Wan and Sheung Wan received 20% fewer profits than expected. The URA earned about $4.7 billion in the previous financial year, which is less than expected. The authority expects it will need to rely on loans for about 10 projects in the next few years. The coronavirus is continuing to infect a lot of people in the city. A government health expert says the trend has peaked, but it's hard to predict how long it will last. He warned residents to stay vigilant against COVID as well as strep-related pneumonia. Veronica Lin reports.
Recently, many residents have caught COVID again for the second time or a third time. Even those who have evaded the virus for 3 years are catching it for the first time. Professor Lau Yu Leung, a government health advisor who is a pediatrics professor at the University of Hong Kong, said while the infection trend has plateaued, it still runs rampant in the city, with around a dozen daily mortalities. Lau said residents should not worry much about these small waves. Mask wearing, however, should be adhered to on public transport. Apart from COVID cases, pneumococcal infections have also been on the rise, with the most vulnerable group being those under 5 or above 60. Professor Lau explained that if patients don't recover from pneumococcal infection within 3 to 5 days, they should consider taking antibiotics. He warned residents to not delay treatment, as the consequences might be severe if it were to enter the bloodstreams or lungs. Mike Kwan, a pediatric specialist who is an associate professor at HKU, said that the current 13-valent vaccines may not be enough to keep the kids from getting infected. The right step would be to import the more effective 15-valent or 20-valent vaccines. Kwan said that recently there's been an increase in respiratory syncytial virus, or RSV, among kids. This phenomenon is unusual during the summertime, he added. He explained that this might be due to the mask mandate, which led to very little exposure to these pathogens. He said patients should be sent to hospital for treatment if they have a persistent fever, difficulty in breathing, or inability to consume food. Veronica Lin, TVB News.
The Civic Party announced its dissolution today after holding an extraordinary general meeting. The decision came after the party's executive committee posts remained vacant. Chairman of the party, Alan Leong, said the organization has not achieved its aims and its era has ended. Mimosa Ngai reports.
The Civic Party passed a motion at an extraordinary general meeting this afternoon, ending its era after 17 years. The meeting was attended by 31 members, with Chairman Alan Leong announcing the decision afterwards.
We passed a special resolution to voluntarily wind up the company, and we also appointed a liquidator. The whole meeting was very smooth, and we did not really have any debate of any sort. So that is what I have to say.
Leong added it was not a surprise to see such a result of the party.
The fate of the party was already dictated by the fact that nobody came forward to seek election as the chairman or the executive committee. So without succession, and given the constraint in our financial situation, to voluntarily wind up is really not a surprise.
The party was founded in 2006, with members mainly coming from the legal sector and previously formed the Basic Law Article 45 Concern Group. In 2007, Alan Leung represented the party and contested in the chief executive election. The Civic Party participated in the Occupy Central movement in 2014 and offered legal assistance to arrestees. In the next few years, different members resigned from the party, including co-founder Ronnie Tong. In the 2019 anti-government protests, the party members were seen at different protest scenes. 4 members got disqualified from LegCo in 2020, including Alpha Yuan and Kwok Ka-ke. Many members resigned afterwards. Mimosanai, TVB News.
A man was injured in cyclone while paragliding today. At 2 p.m., police received a report saying a man injured his foot while paragliding. The government flying service arrived and took the man to the Wan Chai helipad before transferring him to Rutonji Hospital. A similar accident occurred yesterday. A 74-year-old man was injured when paragliding in Shek O. He was rescued after being trapped for 6 hours. Still to come on tonight's news, return of the bunscrambling competition in Chengchao. Turkey is getting ready for runoff election. And a rare all-white panda. Welcome back. The Bun Festival returned to Chengchao yesterday, and the famous bunscrambling competition took place at the stroke of midnight last night. The first Queen of Queens was awarded as fan favorite Angel Wong garnered her 6th win. Chung Yuk-chun won the men's race, but veteran front-runner Jason Kwok was disqualified. The bunscrambling competition finally made a comeback after 3 years of the pandemic. 9 male and 3 female finalists climbed up the 14-meter high tower, scrambling for success. Jason Kwok, who sought to secure his 10th win, as well as Chung Yuk-chun, spent no more than half a minute to get to the top, snatching buns worth the most at 9 points each. In less than a minute, the buns at the top layer of the tower were almost gone. All contestants only had 3 minutes to get as many buns as they could and return to the ground or face disqualification. Some started making their way down in the final minute of the race. Time's up, but a few contestants were still stuck at the tower, including 9-time champion Jason Kwok. On the women's side, Angel Wong beat 2019 champion Janet Kung with 684 points, grabbing her 6th win. She was also crowned the Queen of Queens after winning the 3rd female champion's title since 2016. Wong said she's relieved as she was under pressure because of the fierce competition. Bus driver Chung Yuk-chun won in the men's division with 954 points. He said the trick is to make his way back safe, adding his family and a little bit of luck pushed his way through. Lai Wai-chun, who spent most of his time scrambling buns in the middle of the tower, won the Full Pockets of Lucky Buns title. Meanwhile, firefighter Jason Kwok said he may have lost his touch and the new fall prevention device could have gotten in the way. Spectators will be able to get one of the plastic buns on the tower for free with a voucher at designated locations starting June the 5th. The organizer of the Chengchao Bun Festival distributed lucky buns to the public this morning, a tradition that happens the day after the Bun Festival and Pusik. Despite the hot weather, over 100 people arrived early at the Paktai Temple playground in Chengchao early this morning. They all came for the same purpose, to get some lucky buns. Some residents hoped health and peace can follow them after obtaining the buns. The Chengchao Bun Festival Committee said about 20,000 buns were prepared for distribution this year. Overseas, U.S. President Joe Biden said a deal to resolve the government's debt ceiling crisis seemed very close late Friday. This as the deadline for a potentially shattering default was pushed back to June 5th and seemed likely to drag negotiations between the White House and Republicans into another week.
With regard to the debt limit, things are looking good, very optimistic. I hope we'll have some clear evidence tonight before the clock strikes 12 that we have a deal, but it's very close, and I'm optimistic.
The later ex-state laid out in a letter from Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen set the risk of a devastating default 4 days beyond an earlier estimate. Biden and House Speaker Kevin McCarthy seem to be narrowing on a 2-year budget-slashing deal that would also extend the debt limit into 2025, past the next presidential election. Former British Prime Minister Boris Johnson said new claims against him of potential breaches of pandemic-related restrictions were a load of nonsense.
This whole thing is a load of nonsense from beginning to end, and we've made that clear in the statements that I've issued. I think that it's ridiculous that elements in my diary should be cherry-picked and handed over to the police, to the Privileges Committee, without even anybody having the basic common sense to ask me what these entries referred to.
Johnson made the remarks as he was passing through Dulles International Airport on a trip to the U.S., where he discussed support for Ukraine with former U.S. President Donald Trump. Johnson was fined for breaking his own government's COVID lockdown rules and has been reported again to the police over more potential breaches. Turkey is heading to a runoff election tomorrow that incumbent President Recep Tayyip Erdogan is favored to win. Given his strong showing in the first round, he looks set to beat challenger Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, despite the country suffering rampant inflation in the aftermath of a recent earthquake that left 50,000 dead in the south. Matthew Bray reports.
Erdogan can still turn out huge crowds for rallies. He got very close last week with 49.5% of the vote and has already secured a majority in parliament. He is being challenged by opposition leader Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, but support seems to be ebbing away from the man just a week ago thought likely to oust Erdogan from 20 years of rule.
Parlamentoya sırtını dayamadıktan sonra
Mr. Kemal, what are you going to do if elected? Is there anything you can do after you can't get the support of Parliament? Erdogan taunted his rival. Kılıçdaroğlu's language has got darker since last week, and he has been underlining the country's deep economic problems ahead of the runoff. He has a point. Inflation was driven to 85% last year, and the value of the Turkish lira plunged. Erdogan rejects orthodox economic policy, maintaining high borrowing costs cause inflation. To offset this, Erdogan went on a spending spree ahead of the election, increasing the minimum wage and pensions. Turks themselves are split.
I vote for Recep Tayyip Erdogan.
Why?
He's a good leader. And I think he's good for Turkey.
But my expectation is Turkey is more economy strong, plus the life standard is going to be up.
In the earthquake-hit south, where Erdogan's lax building code enforcement was seen as setting the stage for death and destruction, he won 10 out of 11 provinces. His rebuilding talk has paid off so far. Migration is also an issue for both parties. Kılıçdaroğlu has vowed to repatriate Syrians within 2 years. Erdogan said he has done a deal with Qatar to help resettle up to 1 million Syrians. On foreign policy, Erdogan has been a difficult NATO ally, often pursuing his own agenda. Kılıçdaroğlu said he will rebuild ties with the United States, the EU and NATO allies. He would also probably end Turkey's veto of Sweden's request to join NATO. Matthew Bray, TVB News.
Elon Musk's SpaceX has launched a telecommunication satellite into orbit. A Falcon 9 rocket carrying the Arabsat BADR-8 satellite blasted off from Cape Canaveral in Florida. Once operational, it will beam TV broadcasting and other services to Central Africa, Europe, and the Middle East for Saudi-based satellite firm Arabsat. The satellite will take between 4 to 5 months to reach its operational orbit. Footage of a rare albino panda was recently released by the Wolong Nature Reserve in Sichuan province. It is the only known albino panda in the world. While pandas are known for their black and white coat, this albino panda is fully white. The snowy white animal was first spotted in April 2019 in Wolong with the help of an infrared camera. Authorities then tracked and monitored the panda for over 4 years, resulting in more footage of the rare animal. Experts say that while albino animals tend to carry genetic defects, this 5-year-old panda appears to not have had any significant health issues. And that's the news. Thanks for watching.